Hello, everyone, and welcome to the January 14th, 2026 meetup for the Baltimore WordPress Meetup Group. Today, we're going to be talking about accessibility in 2026. Before we get to the main content of the presentation, we have a few housekeeping items to deal with. Number one, there will be a recording available in about 2 weeks or so. And in that recording, at the very end of it, will be any links that have been shared in the chat during the meetup. So if you are looking for links, you missed them, you didn't copy them, you can find them at the end of the recording. This is an informational meetup. The products, services, and everything else that we show are for your information. Use them at your own risk. Just because we are showing a website, plugin, theme, or anything else is not an official WordPress endorsement of that item. Above all, keep it family friendly, as many of us are attending from home and have all sorts of family members in the background. My usual family member of my German Shepherd is not currently helping right now. We will be doing our best to follow the Baltimore WordPress Meetup community standards. These standards are the following: no spamming or spammer-like behavior. We have people of all different skill levels and backgrounds, so no judgment for people who are at a different level. Generally speaking, don't be a jerk. If you are a jerk or you act like a spammer, we will evict you. Some sponsors to thank before we get started. Anfira LLC, they help companies serious about their WordPress development needs, including agencies who are looking to offload a bit of excess work. They specialize in helping agencies and businesses who are generally frustrated by WordPress. Easy Alley Guide is the feature. They help to make web accessibility easier to implement through done-for-you tools and processes. They have information for agencies as well as individual businesses, nonprofits, and government entities. For more information on the web accessibility, including tools, tutorials, and more, check out easyalleyguide.com. And our third sponsor is OB Digital Consulting. They handle all of our video recordings and prepare them for YouTube. They are great for video editing if you need any help getting things on the internet. And some quick admin before we get started on our main content. We will use the Zoom chat to queue people up. If you have questions, you can drop things into the Zoom chat. Everyone is muted, and during the main part of the presentation, we will enforce that muting. You can't unmute. And then after it, we will have a Q&A. To the presentation, web accessibility in 2026. What we'll be talking about today: what is web accessibility and the Americans with Disabilities Act? What is enough? Many people ask this. We'll be answering it. What's the risk if you don't do enough? What kind of questions should you ask if you're hiring for it? Who is responsible for what parts? Is it just websites or are there other things? And how do you actually get started? This is not going to be a particularly technical presentation. This is more informational about what to do, not so much how to do it. Web accessibility and the ADA. The first thing we need to talk about, and the source of a lot of problems on websites, is that they have forgotten that people live in the real world. Many websites were built for people who are having perfect days, and they're in perfect situations, and they have no problems going on in their life. Well, guess what? Most people aren't like that. Things have gone wrong. They have a crying baby in the background. They didn't get enough sleep. They have a headache. Their allergies are acting up. They're trying to use a smartphone while taking the metro. They're at their kid's soccer game and trying to exchange information like, oh, hey, yeah, I had this great massage therapist. You need to look them up. But then the person chose to use yellow text on a white background. It's a bright sunny day at the soccer game, and you can't read a thing on the website. We need to think about real people in the real world, and these real people having imperfect days every day. Basic websites that are built with Semantic HTML are already accessible. But when we start adding lots of things to them, CSS, JavaScript, and generally using divs for absolutely everything, that starts to create these barriers. Basically, it started out fine, but then you started bolting on all of these different things to it. And that's when you started getting all of the barriers. Accessibility is about removing barriers. It is not about trying to shove some universal solution on everyone, because there is no such thing as a one-size-fits-all solution. In the physical world, think about the grocery store. The grocery store, you walk in, the doors automatically open for you. There's a nice smooth curb entrance, so you don't have to try and climb a step. You just walk in the store, walk down the aisles, and you can bring your own mobility device. If you have your own scooter, you can bring it. If you have your own wheelchair, you can bring it. If you have a cane, you can bring it. You can bring whatever mobility device you personally use. Sometimes companies start to think, oh, I'm supposed to create the solution for people. That would be like trying to shove everyone into a mobility scooter when they arrived at the store. That mobility scooter has a little tiny basket on the front end, and while sitting in it, you can't reach half the items in the store. You can't climb into the dairy case. You can't reach items on the bottom shelf. You can't reach items on the top shelf. And again, you have a little tiny basket. It just doesn't solve the problem for most people. You need to let them bring their own tools. You just have to worry about removing the barriers. Some of the common objections to web accessibility that I've heard a number of times, just use an overlay. Well, overlays are trying to shove that grocery store cart onto everyone. They frequently break content because many of the things that are barriers, they can't detect. For example, keyboard issues make up 9% of accessibility errors on websites. Less than 2% of keyboard issues are detectable by automated software. They don't know if they broke it, and therefore they can't fix it. They significantly increase lawsuit risk. We'll actually get into some numbers later, but it's a huge increase. And most importantly, they don't meet the legal requirements because they're trying to bolt on things rather than remove barriers. And accessibility is about removing the barriers. Some people will say, my customers don't have disabilities. Many disabilities are invisible. Oftentimes people think, oh, I haven't seen a blind person with a white cane walk in. Therefore, I don't have anyone with disabilities. Well, things like dyslexia, they're invisible. Erlen syndrome, color blindness, synesthesia, cognitive issues, lots and lots of things are invisible. Let's briefly talk about veterans. My husband is a veteran, so I end up knowing a whole lot more veterans than a lot of people do. But one interesting fact about veterans is half of them have a recognized disability. So this isn't something that's considered unrecognized like colorblindness. Colorblindness is what's called an unqualified disability. Yes, it's real. It impacts you. It impacts your everyday life, but it doesn't impact it to a degree that you need to be financially compensated. Qualified disabilities mean you need to be financially compensated. So 50% of veterans are falling under the qualified disability. These are people who will walk past you in the grocery store and you won't think anything about them. Because one thing they're really good at doing is situational awareness and masking any issues they have so they don't become targets. They're very good at this. They've literally been trained to do it. So you walk past them and you don't think anything of it. Some of those veterans you're walking past and not noticing a thing have a 100% disability rating. That means the VA, or the Veterans Administration, has acknowledged that they really, really broke that person to the point that they are receiving thousands of dollars a month to deal with all of their medical issues. But again, you can walk past these people in the grocery store and you won't notice a thing because they don't want you to, and the military literally trained them to be able to hide things. Another one is it's too expensive. The problem is losing more than 25% of your people because they're fleeing. Is that expensive? I've heard of people who go to a lot of effort to try to increase a conversion rate by 2 or 3%. And in many cases, they're completely ignoring a huge chunk of people. So I like to talk about the real world. Users are not in perfect situations. They are accessing websites in all sorts of different situations. They're also accessing them when they are in all sorts of different situations. For example, it might be after 3 beers that they're trying to order food. Well, alcohol does in fact impair your abilities. That is a temporary issue. It also has significant improvements in SEO, helps to increase conversions, and it helps to build loyalty with your customers. And most importantly, it meets people where they're at. Now, briefly about the ADA, or the Americans with Disabilities Act. It was passed in 1990. It's got 3 main titles that businesses focus on. Title 1 is about employment. Small companies are exempt from this. That means you may hear some people saying, I'm exempt from the ADA. You are exempt from Title 1 of the ADA. That has 0 impact on Title 2 or Title 3. Title 2 is state and local government and businesses and nonprofits that are performing state and local government functions. What this means is a medical provider taking Medicaid or Medicare. This means a nonprofit doing advocacy on a new state law. This means a business doing trash collection for the county, going to individual homes and picking up their trash. Well, paid for with county funds, performing government service, falls under Title II. And all the other businesses and nonprofits who didn't fall under Title II are under Title III. Web accessibility started to get its name for lawsuits and on the internet back in 2006, when Target was first sued in a class action web accessibility lawsuit. That was 20 years ago. Now, some important dates. April of this year, 2026, ADA Title II, which explicitly states that anyone who's under this ADA Title II needs to be WCAG 2.1 level AA. That's 50 requirements that you have to meet. In May, anyone who's a medical provider under the Health and Human Services, aka you're taking Medicaid and Medicare, you have to be. And then ADA Title III, well, it's already in effect. The Justice Department has said you need to be accessible, but they haven't explicitly written out what standard you need to meet. But every single lawsuit in the last 5 years has said WCAG 2.1 level AA, which means that's the legal standard that you're going to be tested to. If you're a type of entity, if you're a state and local government, it's April. If you're a nonprofit or business performing government services, it's April. If you're a medical provider accepting Medicaid and Medicare, it's still April. And if you're a nonprofit or business in general, you already have to have done it. What that means is I expect to see a significant increase come this summer, because all the lawyers have that April date circled on their calendars. And your best defense is going to be a good offense, which means clean up all of your public communication and make sure you're not an easy target. So what's this quote unquote enough to make sure that you aren't an easy target? The legal answer is going to be you've gotten all the way to WCAG 2.1 level AA. That's not realistic for a lot of businesses. What's realistic is getting rid of the majority of your blocking barriers. You may see some information from overlay companies. Overlays create barriers and they greatly increase the odds of a lawsuit. Don't use overlays. It literally paints a giant target on your back. To deal with the barriers, because that's the thing that everyone's suing about. They're suing because they couldn't access something. They couldn't complete a checkout. They couldn't find the information they needed. Parts of the website locked them in and they weren't able to access other things. People need to be able to read the content, use the functionality, and get help if they need it. Those are kind of the three main barriers that you're going to see listed in every single lawsuit. In order to get to this kind of barrier-free state, we take a look at the 80-20 rule. This applies to a lot of things in life. Most of the barriers come down to just a couple of the WCAG criteria. Just like in life, for example, if we talk about driving, most of the driving violations are going to be going over the speed limit and going through stop signs. Things like that are going to be the most common tickets. You're very rarely going to deal with things like esoteric laws about making a left turn from a one-way street onto a one-way street. This just doesn't come up for a lot of people in their everyday lives. I think I might have done that like twice in my entire life. So here's an example of a website that we worked on to remove a lot of barriers. So before you can take a look at the screenshot, and you can see that even in their main hero area, the text is actually really hard to read because it's literally on top of other content. And just a simple thing in the new one, it's very easy to read their hero content now. Most importantly, before they had a lightning audit score of 2. Now, the lightning audit is a really short audit, and it basically is there to say, look, is it good, bad, or ugly? And they were kind of in the bad area. They hadn't made it totally to ugly, but they were definitely having a lot of problems on their website. There was no accessibility statement. They had no skip to content link. This is really useful for people who are keyboard navigating, who have hand issues, and also people who are using screen readers. There was no good focus state, not enough color contrast, for example, the hero image. And the links and buttons, many of them were not obvious. Either they weren't obvious that the thing even was a link or a button, or it wasn't obvious where they went to. The key results from doing the overhaul were that the website operating costs went down a lot, by about 47%. We basically cut their operating costs in half because we moved them over onto Shopify platform, which was better suited for their needs instead of WooCommerce. We cut their shipping expenses by 70%. Their revenue increased about 16% in the first month after launch, and it had increased about 48% year over year. Their customer service issues were the number one biggest thing that changed. They dropped by 94%. And this allowed the company, with all of this, less headaches and more time. They were able to do a campaign with Good Morning America that well and beyond paid for the remodel of the website. Quite frankly, just the operating costs and the shipping expense reduction would have paid for the updates on the website alone. But the customer service issue decrease and the things they were able to do because of all that extra time and energy that they had, that was really the huge thing. And most importantly, the owner slept better at night. And as we all know, a good night's sleep is amazing. Let's talk about the risks. Lawsuits and demand letters. How did we even get here? The Americans with Disability Act has no fines. There are some states like California, which have the UNRRA Act, which do have fines. But the ADA overall does not have any fines. The Department of Justice collects complaints, but it only has ever pursued very large offenders, which means they don't go after the small ones. That means the only real thing available is lawsuits. That's the only way to financially penalize companies and nonprofits and government entities that don't follow the law. So they became popular. Specifically around 2018, there was a significant increase in the lawsuits and demand letters. And the reason was the Department of Justice significantly pulled back from any prosecution of the ADA. So the private sector took over. And since then, they've steadily gone up. The 2025 lawsuit numbers from UsableNet, this is a company that's been around for a number of years, and they collect regular information about lawsuits and what's going on. 5,114 lawsuits in 2025. That's a huge uptick from around 4,000 lawsuits in 2024. 1,427 of those companies were previously sued. That means that companies are being sued, and honestly, they're not fixing anything. Lawsuits are public record, which means the lawyers can literally go to the list of who's already been sued and just go after those companies again. New York is consistently the leader in lawsuits by a lot. Note that businesses all over the country are sued in New York courts. It doesn't matter where the business is located. Lawsuits in California significantly decreased, which was kind of interesting. E-commerce significantly leads the lawsuits, but the food service industry is a significant up-and-comer in the lawsuits. Theirs doubled from 2024 to 2025. 28% of the websites that were sued had overlays. If we're talking about the websites on the internet, we're looking at closer to 1%, maybe a little bit more than 1% of websites have overlays. So if 28% of the websites that are being sued are using those overlays, that is a huge, huge increase versus the actual number of websites that aren't. Now, for the lawsuits, we have specific numbers. For demand letters, we don't. Demand letters are not public record. They're just sent from a lawyer to a defendant, which means we have estimates from some different law firms who handle a lot of web accessibility suits. We have some estimates that some of the overlay companies have put out about how many of their customers are being sued. They range from 75,000 to 200,000 per year. That's a lot more than the 5,000 we saw last year for actual lawsuits. And demand letters are basically things that are sent. They're a relatively short letter from a law firm saying your website is not accessible, it has these problems, and pay up or we'll take this to a lawsuit. In terms of how many websites are sued, WordPress had about 18% of the lawsuits. Shopify had about 36% of the lawsuits. And if we take a look at that, that's because the vast majority of lawsuits are against e-commerce companies, and Shopify does only e-commerce. WordPress and Shopify are both allow you to do a lot of editing of your own site and make a lot of customizations. They have marketplaces of all sorts of add-ons that you can add, and the quality is extremely mixed. If you just go out and grab a whole bunch of add-ons, most of them are going to have low code quality and therefore increase the barriers on your website. A note about WordPress themes. There is an accessibility ready tag that some of the themes have. This is a one-time test. So when you have a theme in the WordPress repository and you ask to get the accessibility ready tag, they will, and generally in several months, test the website for the accessibility criteria. That is not a full WCAG test. That is just for the specific accessibility ready criteria. Once the theme has gotten the accessibility ready tag, only the theme author can ever remove that tag. The site will never be tested by the accessibility team ever again. So if a theme got the accessibility ready tag in, say, 2015, they would still have it today, even if they had broken every single item on the accessibility ready list. So just because you see that tag does not mean Well, a whole lot. It means you still need to properly test the theme before you actually use it. There's also a lot of themes that don't have the tag just because it's a whole months-long process to get it, who are very, very good. What should you be asking if you want to hire someone for accessibility? Well, the first thing is not all providers are equal. Many of them claim expertise without real-world understanding. Some of them have certifications or memberships. Sometimes that means that one person on the team got that certification. Sometimes that means that that person may not even be there anymore. There are a few certs that you often see. The first one is going to be DHS Trusted Tester. This means that the person went through the DHS Trusted Tester course, which is for WCAG 2.0 with some small modifications. But basically, the person had to go through and do a whole lot of actual page testing and pass all of those tests in order to actually get that criteria. So this person does have a bit of experience on actually testing pages. The next two are going to be from the IAAP, which is the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. The first one is CPAC, CPACC. This is basically a core knowledge or a background information about accessibility. The actual WCAG is only even referenced about 3 times in the entire core competency document. This is more like getting a course in the background of accessibility. So there's a lot of great concepts, there's some statistics, there's some information about laws, but there is not practical knowledge in that exam. The third one is the WAS, Web Accessibility Specialist. This one actually requires you to know something about accessibility and about testing and about how to do some things. So if you see the Web Accessibility Specialist, they have actual practical skills normally. Here are some red flags to watch out for. Anyone who says that all of their websites are fully accessible. They probably aren't. We follow best practices on every project. Well, best practices is a rather vague statement, so that could mean a lot of things. Anyone who says that their tools simulate all disabilities to cover every scenario. Back to the keyboard example. Keyboard issues make up about 9% of failures on a given website. Automated testing can catch less than 2%. So I can guarantee you that those tools do not simulate much of anything. We fix problems in real time, no need for reports. Oh, there's a lot of need for reports at the end. Anyone who says they provide full compliance. That's not possible. You can't have full compliance. Compliance would be to the entire law, and an entire business has to comply with an entire law across all of their web presence. That's just not possible for a contractor to guarantee. What are some good answers? So we scope different accessibility levels based on client needs. That's a good answer because the reality is not everyone needs to hit every target exactly the same. We use real users with disabilities in our testing process. Having someone who lives with these issues every single day testing things is a fresh set of eyes, and it helps to ensure that the entire resulting solution is a much better product for consumption by the general public. We work closely with people who have lived experience to design barrier-free solutions. Again, a very good answer because we want to make sure that this works for real people in the real world, not the perfect people in our ideal world. The real experts work with testers who have lived experience and some certifications. Not all of these people with lived experience will have certifications because these exams can be very challenging to take without disabilities. And they can be a whole lot more challenging, if not nearly impossible, to take with disabilities. They need to use manual testing alongside automated tools. They need to deliver clear documentation and not just outputs from automated scans. And they need to understand the difference between conformance and compliance. Conformance is a specific thing, such as a web page, to a specific standard, such as WCAG 2.1 level AA. Compliance is a business to a law. There's a whole lot more involved in compliance of an entire business to an entire law than there is in the conformance of one page to one standard. Conformance can easily be tested. Compliance is a whole can of worms. So who's responsible for what parts? The management or the leadership at the company sets the tone. So they can say things like, we want our marketing efforts to reach as many people as possible. This is great. They are looking for smooth and efficient checkout processes. They want customers to be able to easily book their own demos. I did work for a company, and after doing the accessibility work, suddenly people were booking their own demos. The website was just much easier to use, much friendlier. They could get information more easily, and they literally started self-booking demos. Leadership can say they want to do quarterly checks to make sure that barriers haven't popped up. The reality is, over time, things change, especially on the web. They're changing regularly. And if you aren't regularly checking for barriers and doing some testing, then errors can just crop up. Who's responsible for what? If you edit it, you're responsible for it. At the end of the day, in terms of the legal aspect, the business is the one responsible. The business is the one on the hook for lawsuits. If you're working with a web provider and they lock you out of everything, then they need to be able to prove that they are making it accessible and have in writing what they cover, including what happens if a lawsuit lands in your inbox. Is it just websites or does it cover other things? Good news. The Department of Justice, when they talked about the ADA Title II information, explicitly said that it covers digital communication with the public. That means your social media, so your profile as well as your posts. If you are using any sort of social scheduling tool and you see an option for bold or italic or anything like that, never use it. That actually removes the text content from your post and replaces that with Unicode glyphs that look like the bolded version of that letter, which means that can no longer be read by screen readers. Do not use bolding or italic or any other formatting on any sort of social media scheduling tool. Only use it if you're posting directly on the platform and the platform directly supports it. For example, LinkedIn does not. Facebook does within groups. So make sure that you're checking that because you may be crafting messages that people literally cannot read. Also be very careful when using emojis. For example, the most common clock emoji is read out as 9 o'clock by a screen reader. That means that you thought you were being cute putting a little clock there, but what was actually heard by people is the words 9 o'clock. So they think that is the time. Emails are communication with the public. That includes your signature. All of the people who have put a big graphic into the bottom of their signature and have all the stuff in there, that needs to go. And you need to have actual text content in your email signatures so that it's readable and easy for people to understand. All of your newsletters that are going out to the public. And for any business or nonprofit that's communicating via text messages, you also need to make sure that those are accessible. If you're communicating with the public in general and let's say you're a medical provider, one thing that people can do if you're a medical provider is allow people to both text and call your business. That can really help with allowing more people to get access to the information. People may not be in a situation where they can call, and texting is much easier. For example, riding on a bus. You don't really want to call your medical provider while riding on a bus. Or they may have an actual disability. Some people with cognitive disabilities have a lot of difficulty with phone calls. Some people who are deaf have difficulty with phone calls for obvious reasons. And some people with visual disabilities also have difficulty with phone calls because imagine being blind and trying to take notes during a phone call. Now, to take notes, they have to interact with their screen reader, sometimes trying to use their voice to speech, as well as having their screen reader read things out to them. That's very difficult to do while on a phone call. So texting can be a great solution if it's done well. The best time for action was last year. The next best time for action is now. So the very first thing you need to do is find out if you have issues, how many issues are these major issues? And for that, we have different levels of testing. In general, the faster the test, the less comprehensive it is. If you've ever gotten a car with oil changes in the US, you've probably heard of a company called Jiffy Lube. They have a really fast oil change service. And included in their very fast oil change is a very short inspection of your car. Now, this is not a detailed inspection. This is not a long inspection. This is a short inspection. They're going to check your tire pressure. Why are they checking it? Well, honestly, when was the last time you actually checked your tire pressure? By the way, it's winter in the US. If you haven't checked your tire pressure this winter, please do. They're going to check your tread. They're going to check your windshield wipers, take a quick glance at your belts. It's a very short test. It's a very easy to do test. It does answer some questions. But just because you passed the Jiffy Lube checkup does not mean you're going to pass a state inspection. That is a much longer, much more detailed test. So when we have a short, fast test, it's not very comprehensive, but it can yield some useful information. Most of the issues that directly affect users who use assistive technology can't be found with automated testing. I come back to that keyboard example. 9% of errors, less than 2% of those errors can actually be found. So manual testing has some easy to learn tests and some that require a bit more knowledge and skill. Just because you tested, it's like having a car inspection. It doesn't actually fix anything. Like your headlight is out. Great, thank you for telling me. But now you have to actually go and replace that light bulb in that headlight. Or your tire pressure is low. Okay, good to know, but now you have to actually inflate the tire to the proper pressure. So there's testing, which is finding the problem, and then there's remediation, which is fixing the problem. Don't buy large, expensive tests unless you've already addressed smaller problems. Also, don't buy large, expensive tests that tell you errors but don't tell you the root cause of the error or what you need to do to fix it. For example, I can give you a report which highlights that your menu item can't be reached via the keyboard. Well, that's great, but you have no idea what you're supposed to do about that. You don't know why that happened, and you don't know how you're supposed to fix it. But if I gave you a report that says, your main menu isn't keyboard accessible. The reason is you're using the default menu that comes with the theme. And the solution to fix it is you're going to install this specific plugin and you're going to follow these specific tests to configure it properly. Now that is a really valuable report. In general, when it comes to remediation, we have items that are better to replace and there are items that are better to fix. When it comes to structural issues, I find sometimes it's replace, sometimes it's fix. And then there's content issues. And that's going to be, well, on this page, I have to go fix my headings. That just tends to be repeated items that you have to go through and fix. How do you get to accessibility? You start with a limited set of tests to help you find the issue, the cause, and the course to correct. Then you want to make a plan to address these by either doing a dedicated build or by doing an ongoing remediation or by doing a build and then some ongoing remediation. For example, I did a dedicated build day for a library website, and they had 100 plus pages on their website and thousands of automated issues. We hadn't even looked much into any manual testing. We just had thousands and thousands of automated issues. So we did a little bit of manual testing to go through and identify the cause and a plan. And then we did a dedicated build day, which removed over 1,000 of those issues from the website because we focused on the structural issues that were showing up on every single page. We've also done dedicated build days to completely rebuild small business websites and just knock out tons and tons of issues. Some of the DIY testing options. There's the Google Lighthouse test. This is powered by the AXE, AXE, which is a tool suite by DQ. And this is going to be a lot like your Jiffy Lube inspection. It's going to find some obvious issues. It's also going to miss a lot of stuff. On an average website, you're going to be looking at probably maybe around 50% of the total issues might be able to be found. A lightning audit, which is 7 tests that are manual, that most people can learn pretty quickly. You can find several of the issues that you missed, and if you combine this with the Google Lighthouse, you can probably get around 60 to 70% of the issue coverage. You will still miss stuff. Then there are paid testing options, and these are going to help you identify better issue coverage. So we have a mini review, which is probably going to get you about 80% of the coverage for issues on one page. It's a pretty short, fast, inexpensive test, and it'll give you some quick bullet points to get going. There's the quick audit, which is going to go a bit more in depth, get into the root cause and how to remediate. And that's going to get you 95% or even a little bit more coverage for the issues. And then there's a gap assessment, which is a multi-page process going through using automated as well as quick audit. And that's going to get you normally over the 95%. It can get you pretty darn close to 100% coverage on a lot of things. For businesses really looking to save money, they usually go with the mini review. For businesses who are like, okay, I really need to know what's causing my errors, what needs to be done to fix them, they're going to go for the quick audit. And then for those who have a board of directors or senior leadership and they need a bigger thing to give them more of a report, they're going to go with the gap. To recap what we talked about. What was web accessibility? It's about removing the barriers. What's enough? Enough is getting rid of large barriers. What's the risk? The risk is going to normally be lawsuits, and it's also going to be lost revenue and lost customers. Because if they open up your web page and you've got yellow text on a white background and they're at their kid's soccer game, they can't read a thing on that website and they're going to go away. Who is responsible for what parts? We also talked about who you should be asking and what you should be asking about for hiring, that it covers a whole lot of things besides just websites and how to get started. So now we are going to go to the chat for questions. If you have a question, you can put just a question mark into the chat. If you want to speak your question, you can use the hand raise feature on Zoom, or you can just type a question into the chat. So we've got a couple of questions in there. Courtney asked, for people who use Flowdesk, doesn't it convert lots of things to images like custom fonts? I have honestly never used Flowdesk, so I have absolutely no idea. Question on email newsletters from Erin. Is there a platform that is known for accessible templates or delivery? There is not a specific platform, but within any of the major platforms, the simpler the template, and I mean go as simple as possible, don't use any of their pre-made templates. The simplest is the best. So I don't use any templates when I build newsletters. I will sometimes use some of their builder, but I try to use as little as possible. And then when you test, you need to test across ideally uh, Apple-based devices for both their desktop, their mail, as well as their smartphone. And you also want to test for Google Mail, of course, in a desktop with both light mode and dark mode. And you also want to test on an Android device, on the actual device. And it's really important to test light and dark across the devices. So if you're thinking about doing a template, you will spend a bit of extra time sending sample emails to a couple of different accounts and testing them across multiple devices with light mode and with dark mode so that you can make sure that the template works, and then you just stick to those templates. Less is more. If you change it, you have to test it. If you didn't change it, you don't have to test it very much. But I have seen some very interesting results from websites who did not test. I actually have a whole meetup that I did on those. Let me see if I can quick grab the slides. If anyone else has questions, you can drop the question mark or the actual question into the chat. Okay, so here's a presentation I'd done on emails, and this is from Lee Jeans. And this is what happens when the image loads, and this is what happens when the image doesn't load. Here's from their social media icons. Lovely. Here's a company that sent out something that was all images, and if you don't have images, wow, that's really a not fun experience. I even have one from Google in here. This is from YouTube. So here is the actual YouTube email as it shows up on my iPhone. My iPhone is set to dark mode, and you can see how incredibly unreadable this email is. How can you encourage designers on a team to stop using Learn More links? Well, the first thing you can do is you can have it be a specific thing on the checklist when they submit a document, and you will count that as a failure. So you kind of start to give your designers a scorecard when they send you designs, and you run it through the scorecard and you send their scorecard back, and you mark every single time they use the word learn more, you mark that as a failure. And you then, people don't like to see that they failed exams, so they can see that. But basically you just make it a part of their job that this is what you are graded on. This is the information that you need to do. And if you don't do this information, then, well, then you failed. Do it over. When they have to keep doing it over, they tend to clean up their X. All right, we are nearly to noon Eastern. So if anyone has any final questions, the alternative to replace Learn More is an actually useful link. So if it is a blurb about the company and then it says Learn More, you just say, about us as the anchor text. So you want the anchor text to always say where the link goes to. Should always answer that question. Learn More is not a specific location, but the about page, the contact page, design services, PDF services, all sorts of other things. Lee, there is a replay of the meetup. It'll be available in a couple of weeks. Everyone who is on the mailing list will also get these slides. All right, the next meetup for the WordPress meetup group will be in February, and the information is on the WordPress meetup group page. And the February event will be the Ask Me Anything, and that will be February 11th at 11 a.m. Thank you all for joining us today.